The drone footage didn't lie. Thick brown sludge poured straight into the lake, just past the no trespassing sign I installed myself. And there was Karen, the HOA president, standing proudly next to a backhoe like she was unveiling a statue. Meanwhile, I was across the lake, phone in one hand, binoculars in the other, already dialing my lawyer. You're probably wondering how we got here, how the HOA ended up guzzling its own sewage and trying to sue me for it. It started with a smell. Not the normal fishy, earthy lake scent I'd grown used to over the past decade. This was sharper, sour, like sun-rotted diapers masked with cheap air freshener. That Tuesday, sipping coffee on my deck, I noticed the water looked different, darker, greasy, like motor oil swirling in a puddle. By Thursday, the ducks were gone and algae had exploded across the surface, mats of slimy green-gray growth where there used to be clean water. I'm not a scientist, but I knew something was off. So I grabbed my kayak, a cooler, and a few mason jars and paddled around the lake like a one-man EPA collecting samples. The worst of the smell came from the southeast cove, near the HOA's storm drainage outflow. That's where I found it, a fire hose-sized plastic tube half buried in the cattails, spewing brown liquid directly into the lake. No filter. No sign. Just raw waste entering the water. I took photos, video, and called the county. Environmental Services said they'd open a case, but I could tell she wasn't losing sleep over it. Around here, the HOA is more powerful than the mayor, and Karen rules it like a queen. You either play nice or get steamrolled. I decided to go straight to the source. On Monday, I walked into the HOA office with a folder of evidence and 3 jars of lake water. Karen greeted me with a forced smile and a tone like she was selling annuities. "Hear about the algae?" she asked. I slid a close-up photo of the sewage pipe across her desk. "That's not algae, Karen. That's raw sewage behind your maintenance shed." She didn't flinch. "Do you have proof it's sewage?" I placed a jar in front of her. "Give it a sniff." She didn't. Instead, she slid the photo back and countered with a violation notice, already printed and ready. A $1,200 fine for hazardous runoff. Allegedly from my property. "It's not your lake," she said smugly. "It belongs to the HOA." That's when I realized the meeting was a setup. Karen thought she could fine me into silence. What she didn't know, what no one on that board knew, was that I own the water they drink. Literally. 30 years ago, my grandfather, a retired hydrologist, drilled the well that still supplies the entire subdivision. When development started, he signed a private use agreement with the builder. The HOA could draw water from the well for a small monthly fee, but ownership stayed in the family. After he died, I inherited it. The HOA forgot all about it. The checks kept coming, quietly auto-deposited into my LLC. I dug through his old filing cabinets, steel drawers packed with blueprints and brittle paper, and found the original agreement, notarized, dated 1989, stamped by someone named Edna. It had no expiration clause, no easement rights, no transfer of ownership, just passive use. Which means while Karen was busy fining me over sludge she was dumping, her entire HOA was flushing their toilets with my water. And now that I had evidence of them contaminating the lake? Well, let's just say I had plans, starting with tightening a few valves. The next HOA meeting was going to be very, very dry. So I made a call to Doug, a friend from a brief stint I did in a water quality consulting firm. Doug owed me a favor after I bailed him out of a particularly colorful incident involving an excavator, a bottle of Jack Daniels, and a police report he'd rather forget. "How soon can you get here?" I asked. "I need full-spectrum testing, lead, copper, coliforms, the works." He didn't hesitate. "Tomorrow." "But if I find something, are you going to go loud?" "No," I said. "Not yet. I'm going silent." Doug showed up the next morning, dressed like someone who owns 6 flannel shirts and a freezer full of venison. We tested 4 sources, 1 directly from my well, 1 from my home tap, and 2 from hydrants scattered across the HOA. The results came back worse than expected. My lines were clean, thank God, but the HOA hydrants were off the charts. Fecal coliforms, phosphates, chemicals I couldn't even pronounce. Not only were they polluting the lake, they were backfeeding sewage into the HOA's drinking water supply. which meant they weren't just endangering the environment, they were breaching health codes, violating our usage contract, and giving me every legal reason I needed to shut them off. So I did. Quietly. No press release. No HOA warning. Just a turn of the wrench in the concrete pit behind my garage, a chain around the hatch, and a padlock for good measure. Then I made some popcorn and waited for the fireworks. The call started first, dozens. Then an emergency email blast. Temporary water disruption due to maintenance. By morning, water pressure had plummeted across the entire neighborhood. Karen's precious clubhouse fountain stopped burbling. Sprinklers died. Toilets gave off a sad gurgle like the sound of defeat. Then came the bottled water trucks, rolling in one after another like troops under siege, funded by the HOA's Emergency Contingency Fund, which I knew for a fact was already drained from their last landscaping disaster. Residents started asking questions, not just about the outage but about why there was no backup system, no notice, and why their $900 a month dues didn't seem to cover basic water access. I could practically smell Karen's panic through her perfume. She called an emergency board meeting plastered with HOA members-only signs, like it was some kind of state secret. I wasn't invited, of course, but halfway through, a neighbor named Paul texted me a photo of the agenda. Item 3, discussion of legal action against well operator. I nearly choked on my beer. Legal action? Against me? For shutting off my own water supply after they poisoned it? The next morning, a certified letter arrived, full of threats and dressed up in aggressive fonts. They accused me of sabotage, endangering residents, and breach of public trust. They demanded I restore water flow immediately, submit to third-party inspections, and accept a new operating agreement, written by their legal team and offering no compensation. I read it twice, then laughed until I nearly inhaled my sandwich. You can't sue someone for not giving you something they own, especially after you've violated the usage agreement with toxic backflow and illegal dumping. They were treating it like a playground slap fight. I had a contract. I had test results. I had years of documentation. So I called Luann, my family's attorney and a specialist in tearing HOA boards apart. I'm going to fax you something, I told her. Then bury them. With pleasure, she replied. 48 hours later, a cease and desist landed on Karen's desk, along with a formal complaint of environmental misconduct, termination of access per Section 8.4 of the original contract, and a notarized invoice for contamination testing, system repairs, and legal fees. Total, $1,147,805.62. Payable in 30 days. Karen blinked, caught off script for once. But she didn't go down quiet. A week later I was officially served. They were suing me for damages, loss of access, and, get this, emotional distress. They claimed I had cut off their water to retaliate over unrelated disputes. Their lawyer showed up to court in a $300 tie, carrying a binder thick enough to stop bullets, and tried to paint me as some unhinged recluse with a vendetta against law and order. "Do you believe you're above the rules of this community, Mr. Franklin?" he asked smugly. "No," I replied. "But I am above the sewage line." The courtroom chuckled. The judge raised an eyebrow. Then I handed over my packet. Lab reports, drone photos, the original signed agreement, and a notarized statement from Doug. The judge looked at the evidence, then turned to the HOA's attorney and asked the 7 sweetest words in the English language, "Why didn't you mention any of this?" Their case collapsed in under a week. Karen blamed her maintenance crew. The crew blamed the board. In the end, the judge ruled in my favor, awarded damages for stress and property value loss, and ordered the HOA to cease any further access to my well unless a new agreement, on my terms, was negotiated. Bottled water trucks became a permanent fixture. The community pool was drained indefinitely. Karen's smug newsletters turned shrill, then stopped altogether. I didn't say a word. I just put up a new sign next to the wellhead, "Private water supply. Trespassers will be billed." And beneath that, in smaller text, "Hydration is a privilege, not a right." I filed my countersuit the following Monday, 47 pages long, hand-delivered by Luann herself because she thought it would be poetic. We named the HOA, Karen personally, 3 board members and their maintenance supervisor. Charges: environmental negligence, willful contamination, abuse of power, easement violations, and defamation. We didn't just throw the book at them, we wrote a few new chapters. I knew they'd fight dirty. Karen never backs down. She turns conflict into brunch and invites every bored housewife within a 2-mile radius. But while she was weaponizing newsletters and WhatsApp chats, I was building a war chest of evidence. I had everything: certified lab results, drone footage capturing a brown stream pouring from behind the HOA's maintenance shed into the lake, timestamps, invoices, and sworn affidavits from 2 former maintenance contractors who'd both quit over what they called unethical waste practices. One even left a handwritten note: "This crap's not gonna stay buried forever." Turns out he was right. We filed in county court, and within 48 hours a hearing date was set. Karen's lawyer tried to stall with claims of pending mediation, but the judge wasn't having it, especially not after I slipped in a waterboard complaint filed by the county itself. Turns out I wasn't the only one noticing brown stuff in blue water. Once the lawsuit hit the docket, it became public record, and then gossip. Big gossip. HOA as criminal syndicate level gossip. Suddenly, neighbors who'd been treating me like a pariah were showing up with Costco muffins and awkward smiles. One even dropped off a binder of old HOA meeting minutes she'd forgotten to return after her brief reign as secretary. Inside were notes from several closed-door sessions where Karen and 2 board members discussed cost-saving measures for waste disposal. Their brilliant solution? Divert stormwater runoff to low-flow retention zones. Translation: my lake. But the real turning point came from someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Barry Carlson, a retired county infrastructure coordinator with a bad knee and an even worse temper. Years ago, I'd helped him out of a boundary dispute with a shady developer by digging up an old land use map he never knew existed. I never asked for anything in return. Apparently he remembered. "Still fighting that HOA?" he asked when he called. "Harder than ever," I told him. "Wanna talk drainage?" Barry showed up the next morning with a USB stick and a manila folder stuffed with internal reports, including one from 2019 detailing unauthorized diversion lines installed along HOA Parcel 3B, which just happened to connect directly to the mystery pipe behind the shed. In short, they didn't just dump sewage, they engineered an entire system to disguise it as runoff while bypassing city inspections. He even had satellite images showing installation crews working undercover, disguised as irrigation contractors. The trial opened on a packed Wednesday morning, courtroom shoulder to shoulder like someone was giving away free land. Karen sat up front, dressed like a funeral director, flanked by 3 lawyers who billed by the second. Her face was so tight it looked vacuum sealed. I sat quietly with Luann beside me, sipping coffee from a mug that read, "My lawyer can beat up your lawyer." Karen's team argued the whole thing was a routine maintenance issue and that I was destabilizing the community out of spite. Their expert, a hydrologist who looked like he hadn't seen a well since undergrad, claimed the algae bloom could have been caused by natural nutrient inflow. Luann let him talk, then calmly handed him a drone photo showing a brown stream pouring out of a pipe labeled HOA maintenance only. He asked for a recess. By day 3, reporters were showing up. Someone was live tweeting the proceedings, and the court of public opinion had already turned. The HOA's legal team buried us in procedural objections. Luann sliced through them like a combine through corn. When Karen finally took the stand, she played the victim card hard, claimed I'd abused my position to cut off the community's water. "Were you aware," Luann asked, "that the well your community relies on was never transferred to HOA ownership?" "I believed it was public infrastructure," Karen replied. "Belief isn't ownership," Luann said coldly. "Did you verify the deed?" Our attorney looked into it. "Do you have that in writing?" Silence. But the knockout punch came when Barry took the stand. In plain English, he laid it out. They illegally installed pipes to dump human waste where it didn't belong, didn't tell the county, and hoped no one would notice. "Well," he said, "someone did." Karen's lawyer tried to object, but the judge overruled him so fast the bench nearly caught fire. The verdict came fast. The HOA was found guilty of environmental violations, breach of contract, and defamation. Karen was fined personally for gross negligence. The board was ordered to pay over $300,000 in damages and legal fees. A court injunction froze all HOA activity until new elections could be held. You'd think that would be the end, but Karen wasn't done. 2 days later, she hijacked a live news interview outside the community center and delivered what can only be described as a televised meltdown. She blamed biased judges, poor soil absorption, and, in a moment of absolute brilliance, actually admitted the HOA had temporarily routed overflow through the lake to cut unnecessary expenses. "Are you saying," the reporter asked slowly, "that the HOA knowingly diverted sewage into a community lake?" Karen blinked, panicked, and tried to spin it. "Not sewage, just gray water. Reclaimed. Untreated. It was natural runoff, plus some operational backflow. So, raw sewage? That term is subjective." It aired live. Twice. Then it went viral. Headline: Karen admits HOA dumped poo water to save money. The thumbnail? Her mid-sentence, eyes wide like a raccoon in a spotlight. The fallout was biblical. Karen resigned. The rest of the board followed. The HOA's bank account was frozen, pending audit. Community meetings turned into mutinies. And me? I didn't say a word. I just sat on my porch, sipping bourbon, listening to the quiet. No trucks, no citations, just the sound of the lake starting to recover. My phone buzzed with messages from neighbors who once called me crazy, now asking if I'd consider running for HOA president. I didn't reply. I had bigger plans, the kind Karen would have hated with every fiber of her power-blazered soul. But before anything else, I had one last thing to do. I carved a fresh sign, painted the letters thick in red, and nailed it to the old maintenance shed. It read, "Do not dump. We're watching." And beneath that, in smaller print, "P.S. We own the water." It all came crashing down in a single humid afternoon, the kind of day that hangs heavy, silent, like the world's holding its breath before something breaks. The courtroom was packed tighter than a feed store on delivery day, every chair filled with a resident clutching their curiosity like a church program. They'd been watching this whole disaster unravel for weeks, first with denial, then disbelief, and finally that quiet, guilty relief that it wasn't them in the wreckage. But today it was Karen. And the wreckage? All hers. The judge's voice was calm, steady, but every word hit like thunder. The HOA was found liable for environmental violations, breach of contract, defamation, and gross negligence. The board was ordered to pay me $3,670 in damages, $80,000 in legal fees, and submit to a full state audit. But the part that made it all worth it? The court's ruling that the well, in perpetuity, was mine. Solely. That meant the HOA couldn't draw so much as a drop from a hose, flush a toilet, or water a lawn without my written consent. The courtroom went so silent, you could have heard a pin drop when the gavel fell. I didn't smile. Not yet. I just leaned back in my chair and let it sink in. Karen was there, of course, sitting stiff beside her third legal team, hands clenched so tight her manicure looked ready to crack. She said nothing, not when the judge stripped her of board authority, not when the environmental agency's pending charges were read aloud, and not even when a uniformed officer walked over and handed her a subpoena. What? TV. Charges. Fraud, illegal dumping, falsified maintenance records. The list rolled on like the end credits to a very bad movie. The same woman who fined me for hedge height inconsistency was now facing criminal trial for dumping raw sewage into a public lake. The news blew up. Local, regional, even national. One outlet's headline, "HOA President Dumps Sewage Gets Dumped." My personal favorite came from a satire site, "Karen Finds Man Who Owns Water, Gets Fined $300,000. It even hit the 6 o'clock news where the anchor tried, and failed, not to smirk as she sipped from a bottle of water on air. Within a week, Karen's house had a for sale sign in the yard and a state seal sticker slapped across the front door. Under investigation. Do not enter. No one waved goodbye. No muffin baskets. Just a parade of city trucks, a hazmat crew, and a U-Haul driven by what looked like her last living cousin peeling out of Willow Ridge like a teenager fleeing from night drama. The rest of the board fell like dominoes. Some claimed ignorance. One guy, Jim I think, told the press he only joined the HOA for free donuts. Didn't matter. Their names were on the paperwork, and paperwork doesn't care about breakfast. A special election was called. For the first time in over a decade, every seat was up for grabs. I didn't run. Didn't need to. The people who once sneered at me now nodded when I walked by. Some dropped off pies. One neighbor, who once screamed at me for splashing his tulips, hand-delivered an apology letter and a six-pack. Funny how power shifts when truth floats to the top. At the first community meeting under the new board, the mood was different, lighter. No lectures on bunting guidelines or mailbox tilt. Just real people trying to rebuild what Karen had nearly drowned. They asked me to speak. I kept it short. When you find the guy who controls the faucet, I said, you better pray he's feeling generous. Got a standing ovation. I added one rule to the new water agreement, not a fee hike, not a usage limit. Just this. Any attempt to override or subvert the rights of the well owner shall result in immediate suspension of services. They called it the Karen Clause. Passed unanimously. I never charged anyone for water. Never planned to. I just wanted them to know whose pipe they were drinking from. For the final touch, I installed a bronze plaque down by the lake. Took me 2 full days, a carved stone pedestal, and a hell of a backache, but it was worth it. The inscription read, "This is what happens when you find the guy who controls your faucet." And beneath it, "In memory of clear water, common sense, and the last HOA president of Willow Ridge." By fall, the lake cleared up. The fish came back. The algae receded. Doug retested the water and sent the results with a note, "Cleaner than bottled. You should sell this stuff." I laughed. Nah, let it stay free. Just not forgotten. That winter, I poured a new slab of concrete over the spot where the illegal pipe once dumped its filth into the lake like some cursed toilet chute. I capped the line, sealed it tight, and bolted on a thick iron sign that read, "No dumping. Ever." And beneath it, "We drink this. Remember." Tourists started taking pictures by spring. A few local college students asked to do a case study. I told them it wasn't grassroots activism. It was just old-fashioned rural revenge, with a twist of legal paperwork and a heavy pour of patience. Life settled down. Gossip faded. Grass grew back over the spot Karen used to walk her dog just far enough into my yard to make a point. She's probably doing the same thing now in some Arizona subdivision, arguing about flower boxes and community aesthetics. But here in Willow Ridge, we remember. Exactly 1 year after the trial, I hosted a lakefront barbecue. Free drinks, live music, paddle boards for the kids. We grilled burgers and toasted clean water. As the sun dipped low and painted the lake gold, we christened the new community dock with a bottle of sparkling cider and a second plaque that read, "The water's fine." I sat at the edge of the dock, boots off, my dog at my side, and a warm mug of coffee in hand. No more meetings. No violations. No noise. Just the rustle of cattails, the shimmer of clear water, and my favorite sign still standing tall above the pump house. Private supply. Trespassers will be billed. The faucet was still mine. And so was the peace.